point. The second point has to do with the Rockefeller Initiative. I invite all of the political media, all media in general, but certainly the political media, to look at the Rockefeller Initiative. It is one of the great stories in American history. It's one of the great political stories, certainly of this or any other time. It is filled with amazing people who are still around and still very powerful. At the time that Rockefeller approached, through his attorney, President Clinton, Clinton's one of his very key advisors was John Podesta. The chief of staff at the time was Leon Panetta. The wife of the president at the time was Hillary Clinton. A good friend of the family at the time, soon to be Clinton's Secretary of Energy, was Bill Richardson. And this event went on, or this initiative went on for 6 years. The press completely ignored it, as if, what's the news there? It's just a billionaire Rockefeller trying to get the president to release all the files on this phenomena, possibly put a letter into every newspaper in the country and release, and basically, and the truth embargo. There's no news there. On the other hand, when the First Lady Hillary Clinton decided to do a little role-playing regarding Eleanor Roosevelt, just to kind of get a sense of what it was like to be First Lady, the press went apoplectic. That was news. In the 20 years that's followed, what has happened? Well, Leon Panetta, the chief of staff, who was fully aware of the Rockefeller Initiative the entire time it went on, became the Secretary of Defense and then the CIA director under President Obama. The wife of the president, Hillary Clinton, who was fully aware of the Rockefeller Initiative, went on to become Secretary of State and almost the President of the United States. John Podesta went on to become his chief of staff, and then in 2002, in a room just on the other hall I was attending, is when he made the announcement that Grant Cameron talked about, calling for the release of all the UFO files out of nowhere. I was there to watch the launch of the Coalition of Freedom of Information, which was kind of a mainstream attempt to look at this issue. I knew it was mainstream, and so when he showed up, I wasn't too surprised. But then when he made that statement, I said, what is going on here? A former chief of staff of a president and an advisor to a president has just called for the release of all files because the people have the right to know, and it's the law? And I said, well, there'll be 1,000 press trucks in front of his house tomorrow. Didn't happen. A year later, he came back and said it again, 2003. And then 6 months after he did that is when Bill Richardson wrote a foreword to a book called the Roswell Dig Diaries, where he basically said the Air Force explanation for Roswell was incorrect. Right? About the same time as when Stephen Schiff was doing his efforts to try to find out the truth, and Colonel Philip Corso came forward with extraordinary revelations about his involvement with the Roswell technology. And the press still didn't see the news quite yet. President Obama appointed Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, but what was the most notable thing to me is one of the most important jobs that he had to choose as the new President of the United States was the person that was going to help form the new government that he was about to launch. And the person he chose as the co-chair, but the principal chair of his transition committee, was the man who called for the release of all the UFO files in 2000 and 2003, John Podesta. But when they lost the election in 2004, went silent. And I can tell you, there is an unbelievable political story that has never been told that exists between the moment that Rockefeller turns up in Clinton's Office of Science and Technology Policy and the election of Barack Obama and the selection of all the people that knew about the Rockefeller Initiative right into the administration, including Bill Richardson, who they tried to make the Secretary of Commerce. These connections are too extraordinary to be accidental. I believe that the story the press could find, which is just dripping with Pulitzer Prizes, is the fact that the Democratic Party at some level made the decision that they were going to be the disclosure party. It should have gone to George H.W. Bush, the perfect, quote, disclosure president from the standpoint of the military intelligence complex. But the Cold War ended in the middle of his term. There was a war in the Middle East. It wasn't quite something you could just do, but he was the guy. He has a resume. It looks like a phone book. But he lost the election. He lost the election to an unknown man from Arkansas with a rather unusual history, who was a draft dodger in their mind and a womanizer in their mind, and they hated him. They hated him so much that officers were insulting him in front of the troops and had to be sent letters that it's actually treason to do that. He could not be the disclosure president, and yet Rockefeller turns up at his door, and it goes from there all the way through. There is a hidden backstory. And I would also say that the day that Rockefeller's attorney showed up in the office of this man that the military intelligence complex wanted nothing to do with, the alarm bells were going off all over the military intelligence world, in the basements and the darkest recesses of the underground facilities. Oh my God, Bill Clinton is going to be the disclosure president. And very shortly after Henry Diamond appeared and the Rockefeller Initiative began, and I remember it quite well because I was living in Washington, it seemed like the entire universe collapsed down on this administration, and they came under every conceivable attack you can imagine from every direction. They went after mothers, dogs, cats, girlfriends, aunts, uncles, Travelgate, Troopergate, Pork Belly Gate, and it never stopped until he was impeached. And I remember press saying, at the time, I was listening to him comment, this is back around, I would say 1995, 6, 7. I remember press saying, you know, the president has his problems, and clearly he makes mistakes, but I don't get it. Why? What is going on here? What is this endless attack on this man and his wife and everything else? Why are they bottling him up so much? He's doing such a great job. He's got a great approval rating, but they're coming at him. There may be a reason that the press doesn't understand that Bill Clinton could potentially have been the disclosure president, and that wasn't acceptable, and he had to go. And when he won again, they became even more concerned, and so it goes. And then eventually Barack Obama becomes the president and brings all of those people from that time back to do what? Well, we don't know. What their major plans might have been were squashed because just a few weeks before the election itself, the entire economy essentially collapsed or was about to collapse because some people decided when they left the building they would take all the money with them. And his administration was completely tied up ever since. So there is this amazing backstory to all of this that if some really tough reporters who like to ask tough questions, the Woodward and Bernsteins of our era, if there are any left, get out there and start asking those questions, I tell you it's going to be very, very interesting. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah.